I'm R.Roy. I'm the CTO for HP Hewlett Packard Enterprise Security Division for our government sector. And I'll be moderating this panel today on application security. It's a subject near and dear to my heart. I've been representing it now for about 10 years. And as I look at these light bulbs in here, and the fact that now we've learned that those light bulbs are listening to us and have software in them like everything else. As we've heard in recent years, software is eating the world. Everything we do is in software, from how you consume entertainment on Netflix, how you buy things on Amazon, and so forth. Right? Everything we're doing is starting to transfer into the people actually using their smartphones right now and checking out the schedule or looking at what's going to be on the agenda for lunch. So everything is in software, and what I've been trying to do over the past decade is to bring an awareness to, hey, as we're doing the software stuff, let's not only focus on our perimeter and on our networks and on our patching, but also what's the risk associated with the software that we're being asked now today in modern development capabilities. The software that we're being asked to publish in some cases with your internet services of like Facebook and Google and so on, it's continuous. You're getting new features all the time. It's happening quicker and quicker and quicker. What is the risk associated with that software? And so what I'd like to do today is we've brought together 3 experts into this panel where we're supposed to be sitting down on couches, and I've never done a panel where I've sat on a couch, but I'm going to try it, and I hope it works for everybody else in the room. And we're going to have a discussion about this topic, and then we'll move into some of the tables and kind of explore the topic with you all. So we've got about 20 minutes for this first section, and I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves, where they come from, and very quickly their own experience in terms of software security. I'll start on my left right here.
Thank you. Good morning. Glad to be here. So I'm currently the CISO for the FDIC. Prior to that, I served at Goldman Sachs running global security operations. Before that, I was with NASA running security operations there, and a number of years in DoD overseas with DISA and Army Europe as well.
Stan Wisseman, security strategist with HPE. Previously, I've been with companies doing software security consulting at Cigital, Booz Allen. I was at Fannie Mae, set up an application security program there. I actually, when I was at Booz Allen, was at FDIC as a consultant running security for one of your main applications, the CAS application. Oh. But I've been at HPE for 3 years now.
Hi, and I'm Roland Cloutier. I'm the Chief Security Officer for ADP, and that is not the alarm company. I was at EMC as their Chief Security Officer prior to that, and prior to that in the U.S. government. So been a bunch of years worrying about software development, protection, and go-to-market technology delivery, and now I'm in a space that I think, to your point, is innovating and driving new technology almost on a daily basis. And it's one of the biggest parts of our global program is how do we protect that software.
What was that example you used this morning, talking to the phone? What was the name instead of Siri? Work?
Hello, Work.
Hello, Work.
Hello,
Work. And so has Work gone through any sort of software security analysis?
Oh, yeah, Work's been through a lot. So I mean, obviously, like any other, near financial firm, we move a few $1 trillion a year, so I guess you can put us in that bucket. Software development protection is just a core to our program. So we have multiple layers of software defense, from software architecture development teams to code investigation, education, pre-code development teams, and then post-code analysis. So we have a very rich, but it all gets back to, I think, 2 things. How fast can you test? How much, and how are you going to help accelerate the business? And how do you educate the people actually doing it? Because I can hire 1,000 pen testers and 1,000 code analysts, but at the end of the day, if if we're not teaching at the developer level, if we're not integrating that into the process and giving them better tools to use or options of technology to use, we're never going to catch up with the migration from waterfall into 6 types of advanced accelerated development processes. So that's where we're focused right now is how do we balance that risk with appropriate commitments we've made. And our commitments are we're not going to put bad code on the market. We will test to a certain level, and we will ensure that it does not go with any type of significant deficiency.
That's an interesting point. As I've come along in this discussion, 10 years ago, people would come at you almost like a deer in the headlights when you'd say, what are you doing about your software layer, about the applications that you're putting into production? And primarily in my government sector, when I speak to somebody in the financial services sector, it was, oh yeah, we got this team, we got that team. No, nothing goes into production without testing it first and removing as much risk as possible from these applications. Today, we're now seeing the pull. We're seeing organizations that are saying, hey, I need to protect my brand, I need to protect our assets, I need to protect my customer data, and so forth. Not for fear of a hammer coming down on them, but just for more for doing the right thing. Are there policies? Let's turn it over to the government. On the government side, where do you see the drivers for doing software security within a government agency?
So I think the drivers have been there for a while. It's just a matter of where you're going to focus. A lot of times we're always focused on the network, protecting the network, the hard perimeter, the hard shell, and then we realized that that was not enough. The NIST has frameworks from which to operate. I think we were always focused, if you looked at DoD when we were doing mission software, that was very well defined, but it was also not in preview of the CIO to manage and to look at for code abnormalities, right? I can give you an example. When I was at another agency where the mission network was operated in a different silo, they had their own policies and frameworks. We actually took common scanning tools, ran it against those set of code that they thought were safe and secure, and showed them that they had the same number of vulnerabilities that were there. The software was also made available to the public, to universities that were used, and we were surprised to show them the ability to walk from one area of their network that they thought was segmented into another area, and be able to utilize the vulnerabilities in that software stack that was available to the public. So I think it's looking at what is there available now and not being afraid to write a policy, but also have the enforcement mechanisms to say you will not move into production with code that is insecure, and having consequences within the organization. Make people accountable, and if necessary, use the pen to, impact their performance evaluation at the end of the year if they're delivering insecure code within your environment.
That sounds like a huge leadership and change management kind of initiative. Without a physical mandate or law requiring you to do it, you're taking on added expense in being able to do this, right? You're adding change to the organization and requiring the development groups or your contracting groups to require this sort of thing, right?
Well, that's what it's all about. If you're not leading in the IT security area, you're a lagger, and the adversary is always going to be ahead of you. There has to be some action from the executives, from the operational team and the technical team to come together to coalesce around the problems that we face and take responsibility to ensure the security of our environment. And not all environments are going to be as secure. You don't need to focus on all the things that are in your environment, but those high value assets, make sure that you're paying attention to those and that you absolutely focus on the things you said. Is code is being delivered in minutes and seconds? Are you using old technology to say, I'm going to review this every 3 years or every 6 months or even every year? You need to be near real time with your analysis of your code and being able to point out the defects not only to the team that's developing, but also the security team so that they can take some action to proactively protect with the technology that's available.
And as far as drivers, I mean, you're very familiar with this, but when there's an incident, like the Air Force had that incident back in the 2007 timeframe, that drove them to set up that whole center of excellence around application security and drove analysis of Air Force applications. I think the DoD has learned also, and they have regulations now to do software security testing. I think it's expanding as well. We're seeing it in NIST. They now have an 853, finally in Rev 4, you know, the application security control family. So that's a good thing as well.
Unfortunately, as Admiral McConnell once said over at Booz, you know, we don't think that Congress was going to do anything about cybersecurity until there was some catastrophic event, and we don't want to wish a breach like the Air Force on any of the fine people in this room today.
But it is a driver.
But it is a driver, and I reflect on it because so many times we are brought in as HPE because we offer some capabilities around checking software, and we get brought in after a breach to say, hey, how did this happen? Was it just a network breach? What is a network breach? No, eventually it's somebody getting into a weakness in a piece of software that was deployed, whether it's a COTS or a GOTS or an open source. There is so much software, and now we got light bulbs, IoT, IOE, OT. Does everybody know all these acronyms? Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, operational technology, like all of our electrical grid systems. We've got WannaCry, we've got Heartbleed. I don't know who comes up with all these names. And now we've got an insider threat I heard in the other room called Reality Winner.
No, that's the real legal name, by the way. So I'm thinking, I'm reading the news, I'm like, okay, real cool hacker, cool name. And then I'm reading like the real news. No, that's like the real.
And her mom, Mrs. Winner.
Right. So, Stan, you've been doing this a long time as well. How does an organization get a handle on, let's put aside the policy or a mandate. Liability is another side issue that I'd like to get into, but how does an organization pick it up and start maybe a new program or discover their own risk associated with their software layer?
I think a key aspect of this is asset management. You know, you need to understand what your portfolio is, and that's many times a precondition for us to succeed as information security leaders that we don't have control over. You know, it's actually not a line item in our budget, but we need to influence and make sure they have asset management and have that. And there's different philosophies on what you do as far as, do you draw a line in the sand and say we're just looking at active projects of, you know, those applications that are in flight and looking at them and integrating in security testing to get a picture of the vulnerabilities for them? Or do we look at your whole portfolio? And many organizations, as they get started, and what I've done in the past is you draw that line and say we're looking at projects that are in flight, that have budget, have resources, that can actually go and do the remediation. And then over time, as you mature, you can then open up the whole kimono and say, let's look at the whole portfolio and understand the risk of all your applications. But that's a big challenge as well. Once you know, you need to do something to counteract those vulnerabilities. And if you don't have the budget or the resources to do anything about that, then you're sometimes at risk in another way because you're not doing anything. So you may have to have other countermeasures in place like WAFs or RASP to hopefully mitigate those. If you get
WAFs?
Web Application Firewall, those acronyms, sorry. You know, so Web Application Firewalls and runtime security protection, be able to mitigate those vulnerabilities in your software that you can't address and deal with the root cause.
But, you know, I want to pick up on this because you're so right? And I was smiling over here talking about, because we always talk about asset management. Everyone thinks about, especially in our space, well, what are the routers, what are the machines, what are the PCs, you know. No one ever thinks about the software. So it's funny how you can use that type of information to leverage your position within the organization to drive the discussion. So for instance, you know, I remember I had a discussion early on, and I had come up with a number of 690 go-to-market applications. And I'm in front of the executive committee, and there was a bunch of murmuring going on. Roland, we only have 125 go-to-market applications. So, oh really? You know, here's the list. And it wasn't that it was all different go-to-market products. It was the same application that was developed for multiple purposes, multiple types of that application, and the derivatives below it was astronomical. But that's what we had to protect. And so I think as you get clarity and transparency, it opens up those lines of communication. And the other thing you start to scratch on that I think is so important, especially in early stage organizations, agencies, or companies that do this, is it's not an all or nothing, right? And it's not, hey, security budget, we can't afford it. Right. You know, we're point or 4.2% of the IT spend, we're never going to get the money to do it. Make it part of their business case. Sit down with your chief of procurement. Sit down with your chief of finance or in that office. As they look at the business cases that IT brings forward for which to develop these new softwares or go purchase them, make it part of that business case that there's a security line item for either evaluation and or testing.
If you can make the business case that you've reduced the vulnerabilities and the defects, in that software base, and actually prove that they're ultimately saving money as a fact that you're actually finding these early,
it's an amazing discussion point.
I know some people in this room have done that.
Yeah, yeah. It's absolutely, it truly does become self-funding, and it's the same on time to market. If they get to the end of, and I know I saw this in government so many times, you get to the end of the project, bring in the pen testers.
Right.
They beat the living crap out of it, right? And next thing, it's withered away in a pile of poo on the floor, and they got to go back to the beginning. You just lost 3 months of death.
Yeah,
3 months.
3 months would be easy, but I think the way that we are looking at it now is testing as you would operate. So you have your testing start in the way that you would operate.
Exactly.
You mimic your network or your environment from the start. So they're developing as they're going to deploy, but you also get your security, your architecture, all of it designed and built as a unified platform and tested that way. Testing the software by itself does not give you all of the risk and vulnerabilities that you need to. You need to look holistically at this and continue to look at it holistically after deployment and a continuous monitoring framework. We hear about it, but it's not really operationalized. When you think about continuous monitoring, it's all the time. It's having those folks with eyes on 24/7 and having the expertise available so that when something happens, you're not scratching your head, what do I do? So you practice the development piece, but also the reaction as well when something does go bad.
Interesting. So I heard from the executive committee, and getting that buy-in, I do believe, is critical these days, because executive committees, it's now a CEO discussion and a board discussion in many organizations like Heartland Payment Systems that had a very large breach. And obviously, when you have that size of an issue, it gets much greater attention within the organization. And to your point about the Air Force, it gets a certain priority. It would be nice if organizations were proactive without requiring a mandate, but without the mandate, how do you get the funding for putting a program in place? Or does it follow CDM, where Jeanette Manfra this morning from DHS was talking about all the preparation they did with WannaCry and driving their asset management portfolio, understanding what is the hardware, but CDM also supports software. Finding out what's all the software have out there and where are vulnerabilities. Can you speak to that?
I could. So it's getting to the executive level. I look at things in different levels and knowing what you have. If I go to the executive level and I'm speaking about 10 products and in reality we have 100, I'm given a view that is not correct. Intrinsically, it gets back to having a policy. I always say, what's your policy? Do you have the process and then at the end the controls in place and the reporting to show this is the way that we operate and function? If you have folks that are managing software, you get them in to review your asset inventory, and nothing goes live without an operational framework. And then it's the reporting and the value add, not only to it's more secure, right, but what value is it providing to the corporation, and how can I reuse as well? So you're showing that you've secured the code, you can reuse it, you're monitoring it, and you're protecting the brand of the organization, but you're also protecting the folks that are utilizing this capability every single day. It's having that story and being there long enough to make a difference. Sometimes we tend to change our job so often that we come up with a concept and we never see it through to fruition, and we leave it behind for someone else to finish, and it never really, gets built the way that you want it to. It's just the software. I want the software designed and built to perform a function, and I don't want it to do anything else. And when it does do something else, I want to be notified immediately from at all levels, right? And when it becomes that event that's going to cause a reputational damage or an event, I want to be able to notify all levels of management within near real time. So it's a concept that we are pushing towards, and it's going to take inside the government, I call the folks that are delivering this capability to the code inside, but also HP, the Symantec's, the McAfee's of the world as well, to design their products so they are able to speak to each other at machine speed, to make it easier for the folks that are designing and operating the environment to quickly get ahead of the adversaries that are always looking to penetrate our networks and our application systems.
It's almost like self-aware in the sense of, I know I'm not operating at the level I should be operating on. I either need to go down to a degraded mode or communicate out and say, okay, like to some kind of, I'm not sure what the endpoint would be in all contexts, but hey, you need to be aware that this function is not properly
correct. It's doing something extra that wasn't there yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, and having the analytics. It's someone speaking about AI. AI is great, but you also need that human to say, yeah, this is actually something bad. This wasn't something that was designed that all of a sudden you had that one user or two users that touched a part of the software that was designed to operate that way, that you set off the wrong alarm bells.
And I think you still have to do that level of automation even before it is software, right, through the development lifecycle. And one of the things we do is we've engineered technology into our code repository. Mm-hmm. So, as soon as they check in code, at the end of their shift or day or night, wherever it is around the globe, it's automatically getting tested, right? We've given, both the developers and the QA folks and so on, tools and capabilities that they can do it as they're working and test and validate. One of the areas that we're focused on, and I'm really interested because I know you've driven a couple of really big programs, is we want to do this pre-certification capability. So you're going to take a set of code off a shelf, and that has already have gone through its stride process. It's already have gone through its sort of evaluation process. It'll be certified, and then as they attach to that code, well, that's 10% less that we have to test at the end. So we're trying to get to that speed. So and I think the final point is, and you really mentioned this, is how do you get the report out of that? So most of our systems now all report into a GRC, or a governance risk and compliance platform. That we used to have a software bug track independently. Now that system is integrated with our GRC, aligned to the product and to the business unit. So it becomes a part of its portfolio of risk beyond the vulnerabilities, beyond the systems issues, beyond the business process. Now they're seeing product level issues. And that is really, when we added that component, was an aha moment for the business, saying we're compiling our risk and changing our risk, based on how we develop code.
You knew I was going to ask you to define that acronym, so you did it.
You did a great job of
you saw the fear in my eyes.
I heard a lot of acronyms in this morning's sessions, and some of them even went over my head. And I've been doing this for a long time in our government business. Very interesting, and I want to key in on one point. You mentioned now being able to derive reports and understanding the risk associated with that layer, right? You've got other risks in the organization. You can do scans of the network and look for open ports and look for unpatched software and things like that. But it seems to be a new component for organizations, and even the CDM program, the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program at DHS, has loosely added software vulnerability management as that continuous monitoring kind of component to understand better. Let's start scanning all of our software or looking at it from either a dynamic or a static perspective. But where does the buck stop? Let me ask you this first. Is there an explicit policy within your financial services firm for doing this, and how extensive is it? Is it a page? Is it 2 pages? Is
it's 2 paragraphs.
2 paragraphs.
Those must be tested into the standard. So there's a standard about testing, and those cannot go into production unless those have been. It's really simple. I mean, from a policy, it's simple, it's easy, and it's easy to understand. But implementing that and ensuring that is the tough part, right? Making sure that new dev teams that are spun up. I mean, we're in 83 different countries. We have 58,000 people, driving this business on a daily, making sure that happens. And it's the integration into the data centers, into the fit and DIT environments. That code was not on that box yesterday. So when we're using cyber defensive technologies now as application control points to say, whoa, that's not in that environment. Who put that there and why? So making sure that those all roll up and work together are incredibly important. And by the way, we can't do this level of application until all that's done. And I think why DHS is getting so great in this area is they've been able to really define derivative risk. So they know that if something happens here, my risk portfolio, this is what could happen. So now if something happens in an application here that would get access to that, that's how I measure that risk to the application.
That's a good Heartland example right there, right? Because they did several PCI audits on the payment processing system, and they all came out clean. No problems with it whatsoever. And it was what? A vacation request system that happened to be on the same subnet that was breached. So that would be considered a mission assurance category 3 kind of a system, right?
Yeah.
Kind of non-essential to the core mission of the business, but yet that was the system that was used to perform such a significant breach.
And I just want
I'm
to add
getting
that,
the ends signed over there, by the way.
And I'm the moderator.
I wasn't
so
even looking.
Thank you.
So I just want to add, you know, at Fannie Mae, we also leverage the software development lifecycle standard. So you can integrate security touch points or activities into that, and then we had a separate standard for secure software, you know, as far as giving guidance on how you actually do that. But I do think you need to have, you know, the high-level governance, and then the implementation. You know, we implement a shared service model, and there are different ways you can do things, but it's very effective. We didn't even touch upon DevOps. So that's something we needed to talk about too.
Yeah.
But
Okay. So what we can do now, though, this is not the end. Actually, this is a new entity by ICIT called the Learning Hub. We're going to break out now, and we all will come out to your tables and sit down and chat about what you're doing within your own organizations and ask some questions of you on how you're working. And you can ask questions of us as well. So we'll have people at each table. We're going to do that for about 15 minutes, and then we go to lunch. So if you can all just stay seated, we'll just kind of mingle and have some further discussion. Thank you.